segment 6 of 7 for today. If you've hung in there this long, we're almost there. Justice or social justice. Again, definitions plays a huge role here. So please, if you're responding to someone or something, or if you're in discussion, please stop, listen, breathe, ask questions. Make sure that you are speaking the same language, so to speak, using the same definitions. But let's talk about justice. This is a very important thing. Micah 6 and 8. God has told us what is good, that the Lord requires of us to do justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly with God. And as a believer, as a Christian, I just want to confess what has been said in the Word and by preceding Christians. God defines justice. And as God defines justice, which knows no segmentation of persons, equal scales for all, as God has defined justice, then if someone says social justice, it's a very common term, very popular term these days, it could mean, and often does, that they're referring to justice in a specific segment of society. So if when people cry out for social justice, and what they mean is we need justice for everybody, every single believer ought to rise up in support and say, yes, justice for all. There are some, however, who are using a different definition. I know I've already talked about definitions, but for some people, they're changing what justice means for specific political ends, and it no longer looks like what God has laid down as what is just, what is right, what is fair, what is even scales. And so whenever it's that, then I and everyone else seeking to be consistent with Scripture, we need to point it out, clarify, and we need to bounce. We need to be out of that. But we need to make sure we're making that delineation based on knowledge and familiarity with what God does say justice is. Because here's the way it has played out. And again, I'm just talking about what I've seen and what I've heard. I'm not talking about news headlines. I'm talking about people in my life, in my community, discussions I've been a part of or overheard or the like. This is what often happens. Some group, whether it be racially divided or whether it be some other division, some group that is an other, not like us, they come under condemnation, unjust condemnation. They come under persecution, which should not be. They do not receive just treatment. And this is not just legally, this is medically, this is socially. And believers, Christians, instead of saying, no, even if I don't agree with them, even if I don't like them in some cases, they ought to be treated justly. A great many believers say, serve them right. Why? Because they're other. That's not justice. That's not what God has. That's not doing justice. That's not loving kindness. That is not walking humbly before God. That is setting self up as God and determining who does and doesn't deserve justice. And that's just false. And that is unchristian. It is hateful. So, doing justice for a Christian means necessarily sticking up for and attempting to be a voice for those whose voices are being muffled, for those who are weaker, who are being oppressed, the powerless among us. And that necessarily means standing up for people that we very much disagree with theologically, politically, philosophically, whatever. And this is not just a race issue. This is a across the board. We need to be consistent. We need to be for justice, social or otherwise. So long as when we say social, we're meaning a segment of society deserves justice, because all of society deserves justice. This applies even in religious realms. I have heard a great many believers, Christians, church folk, talk about they ought to shut the mosques down. No, they shouldn't. That's not Christian. Not unless you want to welcome churches being shut down. What we ought to do as Christians is be about justice for all. What we ought to do as Christians is want to reach people for Christ, and then when their hearts are changed, then they will follow him. That's justice, social and otherwise.